Share. Okay, so now we're ready to go on. So yesterday we talked about a guy who wants to back out of a lottery. We said that that's not permitted according to halacha. Okay, here's our next one. Kana aliyah b'Shabbos umachor la'acher biyoter kesef. Oh, there we go. Thank you. A guy purchases an aliyah and then sells it at a profit. Okay. So the shul's happy, it's getting its money, and he's happy, he's getting his money. Okay.
He's scalping
Scalping aliyahs. There you go. Echad mimitpalalei beit hakneset kana aliyat shishi b'saf mea shekel. So a guy bought shishi, which is considered in some circles as to be an important aliyah. He buys shishi for 100 shekels. Okay. ולאחר מכן בא אורח אמריקאי שהוא מעוניין בעליית שישי והוא מוכן לשלם עליה 1,000 shekel. This is, of course, it's an American, right? An American comes, he's a guest. He's prepared to pay 1,000 shekel for shishi. והסכים הזוכה הראשון למכור לו את עליית השישי שכבר קנה תמורת 1,000 shekel. And he says, so the guy who bought shishi for 100 shekels says, sure, I'll sell it to you. V'achar kein higiu hagaboyim v'tanu sha'akesef magia lahem. But then the gaboyim came and they said, hey, this 1,000 shekels goes to us. V'hazocha harishon toin shuha ba'olim al ha'aliyah lasot ba'kirtzono v'lachein hakesef magia lo. And the guy who bought the aliyah originally says, nothing doing. That's my $1,000, my 1,000 shekels. Hadin im mi, who is halachically correct. Okay, speak it out. Okay, who's right? Who's wrong? Does the shul get the 1,000 shekels, or does the buyer get the 1,000 shekels?
Doesn't
you push the guy or you push the line?
Well, I don't know if it matters. It's a shtibel, so they go over. The guy comes in. He's probably, if he's American, that means he's loud and you know, and and he says, okay, who's in charge here? And so the gabbai says, what can we do for you, kind sir? Just like any Israeli would say. And so he says, I want to buy shishi. I'm sorry, you've already sold shishi. Oh, you sold shishi. Who's the guy you sold shishi to? And then they point to the guy, and he says, "Oh, I'm happy to let you buy shishi for 1,000 shekels, sir." Okay.
I guess the question is it a commodity that the person who bought it owns, or is it something that the shul still gives out?
Yeah.
And it's money for the shul. And I
Well,
think it's
right.
the latter.
Well, we all agree the shul should get it. The question is, who's within is the guy within his halachic rights to say, is it his to sell? That's the question.
What if the shul was giving it out to people that they wanted to honor, and then this guy gives it to some guy who perhaps is not deserving of it there?
That's different. That's different because
he doesn't have a total right.
So you're saying it's
sell.
not. That's an indication that it's not totally his
Exactly.
to give to use as he wishes.
Still kind of belongs to the shul to decide.
Is it wrong for giving someone an aliyah and the gabbai says, no, I'd rather somebody's walking the door, I should give it to him instead? You know, I'm a lady, for example, I was there and then there's another lady came in later on that hadn't had aliyah for so many years, and then I'm sorry, I want to give it to this person instead.
Yeah, but they shouldn't say, Hal, I'm sorry, I want to give it to that person instead. They should probably have to ask you permission. Hal,
That's the question.
Hal, would it be okay? It's your aliyah. We've already committed it to you. David, welcome.
Person.
So wouldn't it make more sense? I mean, if you've already been committed in aliyah.
Well, I say it's if I say no, you can't, and that's the difference.
Yeah.
I think if the shul let the American have the aliyah, even though it's not the other guys to give, then they forego on the money. Right, in other words, you didn't have a right to give the kibbutz to the American, but if the shul knew that and let them still have the aliyah, instead of saying, no, you can't do that, can't come up for shishi, then they forego the money. That's right.
What if the Gaboim are under the impression at the time that they're going to be making 1,000 shekels off this guy?
Right.
So they're under the mistaken impression.
He was loud and they heard him.
Yeah. Joby?
I think this whole entity belongs to the Kehillah. It's not in commerce that occurs between two different people. Well, and before it all started, the Kehillah owned or sold the aliyah. Now you're transferring the sellership to a different person.
Right.
And
And I guess the question is, are aliyahs transferable according to halacha? Concert tickets, sometimes it'll say non-transferable,
Right.
right? And sometimes it'll say transferable. And that's within the purview of the seller, right? Seller can withhold the rights to transfer, which means it's a conditional sale. It's a limited sale. And we have such a concept in halacha as well. I will sell this house to you, for example, on the condition that you don't turn around and sell it to Plony. Okay, there are circumstances in which you can make a condition like that on a sale. All right, so let's see what the is.
Secular law, if the transactions were not effective, usually the money goes back to the payor, right? So, I rescind the deal, money goes back, and title goes back, whatever.
Yeah.
Just undone.
Okay. But here the services have already been rendered. The guy already got his aliyah. Kasav b'sefer olas tamid, Adam shekana aliyah lemeshech shana b'mechir mesuyam u'mishalem al kach kol chodesh. The Sefer Olas Tamid gives a case where a person purchases a weekly aliyah for the year. Every year he gets, every week he gets his aliyah, and he pays on a monthly basis his annual pledge. So at the beginning of the year, he pledged $120,000 to the shul, and every month he gives the shul $10,000, but he gets an aliyah every Shabbos for that privilege. V'niftar be'emtza hashana, and then he passes away in the middle of the year. Chayavim hayorshim lahamshich l'shalem et demei ha'aliyah ad sof ota shana kamo shehitchayev avihem. So the heirs are obligated to continue paying the cost of the aliyah until the end of the year, because that was their father's pledge. He had pledged to receive that in exchange for receiving an aliyah every week, he pledged 120 grand. He dies in the middle of the year. He only got $60,000 worth of aliyahs because he died in the mid-year. But the halacha is that the heirs have to pay out the remaining 60K because of shorish lahem from their father's estate. Oh, sheyimkeru et aliyot la'acherim v'hazocha yishalem lebeit hakneset. Alternatively, they could sell the remaining aliyahs to a third party, and that party could pay the shul. V'im hazocha kana es ha'aliyah b'zol yoter mima shehitchayev avihem hayorshem yashlimu et hahefresh lebeit hakneset. If the third party pays less than what their father was paying, the heirs, have to make up the difference. But let's say they sell it for more than what their father was paying. Profit goes to the shul. Why? Because you cannot enterprise on the interests of the synagogue. You can't make money off of the synagogue. In other words, when you're engaging in commercial trade where a synagogue is a party to that, the profit has to go to the synagogue, not to your personal endeavor, which is fascinating because people make profits off of synagogues all the time, right? We have a caterer who makes profits off of a synagogue. We have a guy who comes in and sells lulavim and esrogim, and he makes profit off the synagogue. So it's not an absolute rule, but when the shul has a financial stake to which they are still an active party to, such as the sale of the aliyot, which is the normal operations of the synagogue, so then those profits have to go to the synagogue. Okay, well, lefi hatam hazeh, magia ha'elef shekel lebeit hakneset ki ein lasot revachim al cheshbono. And based on this tshuva from the Olas Tamid, it's clear, without any ambiguity, that the 1,000 shekel that the guy pledged for getting shishi, this American, would have to go to the shul. Ulam, however, b'shiari knesses hagdola, kosav shaharevach magia liyorshim. The Shari Knesses Hagdola disagrees with the Olas Tamid. These are early Achronim. And he says that the profit goes to the heirs. If they're able, since they're on the hook for the remainder of the year to pay their father's pledge to the shul, if they can sell the service that their father was receiving from the shul for a higher amount, they are allowed to keep the profit, and they just have to give what their father owed back to the shul. And according to that opinion, then the guy could sell his shishi aliyah to the wealthy American and keep all the profit. Ulam. So you have a machlokes here. Ulam yesha kasvu ledamot nidon zeh l'mashen nifsak b'shulchan aruch. He says you could make the following analogy. And the Makor Baruch says that this was done by Rabbi Yitzchak Zilberstein in his Sefer Chashukei Chemet, which is a fantastic Sefer. I'm debating whether that's the next work that we should go with, because I have that on my CD. In the name of Rav Eliashiv, that really the profit belongs to the first person. The first guy who bought the shishi aliyah. Ela sheyesh lo l'shalem chelek maharevach lebeit hakneset kiven shereviach kesef al yadam ayin sham. But the argument is that since you profited through the shul's services, some of what you profited should go to the shul. Okay, so let's see how this is sort of like the shul gets a cut. This is a middle position.
Right.
Yesha kasvu ledamos nidon zel l'mashen nifsak b'shulchan aruch b'shliach. Shahalach liknot davar sheyesh lo mechir kavua. There's a case in the Shulchan Aruch. I send my shaliach to go buy a certain piece of merchandise for me. Okay, and it has a fixed price. V'hamocher natan matana l'shliach milvad ma shekana, shahashliach v'hamishaleach cholkin b'matana. So I go to the seller, I buy the widget. Let's say the widget costs $100. The seller says, "Oh, who are you buying this for?" Yankel is, Yankel, he's been such a faithful customer. Here's a toaster. So he gives a toaster to the shaliach. He brings it back. So there's a halacha that the shaliach and the mishaleach, the buyer and his proxy, split the value of the toaster. It's not just that it belongs to one, it belongs to both of them. Ki ha-mishaleach toein lulei ma'osai lo hayiti mekabel hamatana. Because the seller says, if it weren't for the fact that I'm the buyer, this gift would not have been given by the seller. V'hashaliach toein lulei shahalachti lamocher lo hayita ba'a hamatana. And the shaliach argues, had I not gone for you to buy the widget, you never would have gotten the gift. So lachein cholkim, and therefore there is an opinion that they split it. The lachein gam b'mikra hazeh yachlokim, and therefore Rav Sharaga paskins that in this scenario, the shul and the guy getting shishi should split the profit. So the only question is the guy who bought shishi, he is selling his aliyah, so he doesn't have to pay his original $100 pledge. So he should give the shul 500. The shul should keep 500, and the shaliach should keep 500. Now, what if but that's going to be problematic. What happens if the first guy who bought shishi pledged 100 shekels, and then the second guy says, I'll buy it for 180 shekels. So if we split it, it turns out that the shul is getting less than what they had originally sold it for. Right? Isn't that right? In other words,
Maybe he keeps 40 and gives 40 to the shul plus his 100. So they split the profit.
so that's the question. Do they split the profit? You know, after the first buyer gives up his 100 shekels, and then they split the 450 between them. In the case of 100 versus 1,000, and then in the case of 100 versus 180, he's got to pay 100, and then they split $40 both ways, 40 shekels both ways. So that's the part that's not so clear. When we say they split it, what does that mean? Okay, so let's take a look. Kain bir hasma sham, the min hadin hayachol magia lahashaliach. So the Sma explains that really the shaliach, the proxy, could have really argued that the toaster belongs to him. Amru Chazal shiachloku bahadadi hamotar. It's the excess after I've paid and received the goods. Whatever gift is given on top of that is something that the two of us split. Okay. Now, he says Rav Sharaga had discussed this all the way back in Siman Mem Dalid. So what Siman are we up to now? This is Siman Kuf Samach Dalid. So we should probably go back and review Siman Mem Dalid. The question is, let me see. Barry, do you have all of the old packets from before?
Not you need to carry them all.
Yeah. Let me just see if I can quickly find it. No, it's not that one. Not that one. Getting close. Getting closer. Here, it's this one. There we go. Okay, 1 second. Closer. Here we are. Bedin Adam shehirviach al yedei mamono shel acher. The halacha of a person who profits off of someone else's money. Adam shesholach shliach liknot lo sechora mesuyemet, v'hashaliach kibel matana b'tmura lekniyato. A person, this sounds vaguely familiar because we've done this. A person sends his shaliach to purchase merchandise, specific piece of merchandise, a widget, let's say, and the shaliach receives a toaster as a gift in exchange. Ha'im hamatana magia l'shaliach o l'bal hamos. Who gets to keep the gift? So this is really the more of the background of the case. So again, in order for us to be able to move forward with this, we have to say that Rav Sharaga is dealing with the shul as any other entity, just like no different from any private party. In other words, the shul is like the person who gives me the means to be able to make money. And so therefore, the argument that the Knesset Hagdola makes is that you can make money off of the shul. Sefer Olas Tamid disagrees, and he says that no, you're never allowed to make money off of the shul's, the shul services. But if you're going to go according to the opinion that you can, so then the question is, do you get all of it or do you have to split it? Okay, so By the way, before we start this tshuva, just want to remind you that tomorrow is a fast day. And the fast starts at 6:39 a.m. So we'll do our regular shear, but it might be a good idea if you wake up a little bit earlier and have something to eat or drink before, you could still eat now. You could still have your coffee. You could still bring your coffee with you, but right before we finish the shear, you'll have to stop drinking. Okay. Isa b'Yerushalmi Maseches Demai Am Haaretz Sha'amar lechaver sheyikach lo yerek michaver acher. So the Gemara in Yerushalmi says as follows: a person tells an Am Haaretz tells a chaver. A chaver is a person who's meticulous in tithing, and an Am Haaretz is someone who's not so meticulous in tithing, is not as knowledgeable. But he sends his friend, the chaver, sheyikach lo yerek mechaver acher. Go ahead and buy me vegetables from this other chaver. V'lokach bistam v'lo omar bishvil mihu lokeach. And he purchases it. He purchases the vegetables without telling the seller that he's really a proxy for someone who's an Am Haaretz. Rabbi Yehuda Sover lo nitkavin hamocher lezakot ela lelokeach. So Rabbi Yehuda says the seller's intention is to give it to the actual purchaser, not the shaliach. The kivin shahalokeach chaver nasan lo daver she'eno meusar v'hu chayav la'aser. And so therefore, the seller, however, was not aware who the buyer was. And therefore, the seller, when he relinquished the item, gave it as an untithed item. In other words, there's a halacha that when you sell something to an Am Haaretz, you have to tithe it before you can sell it, working under the assumption that the Am Haaretz is not going to properly tithe. But if you sell something to a chaver, you don't have to tithe it because you may assume that he, as the purchaser, will tithe it himself. So Rabbi Yehuda says, since the seller thinks that this guy is the buyer, so therefore it's the v'hu chayav la'aser. V'hu chayav la'aser ela lokeach. So Rabbi Yehuda saver lo nitkaven hamocher lezakot ela lokeach v'kivin shalokeach chaver natan lo davar she'eno meusar v'hu chayav la'aser, and therefore the Am Haaretz has an obligation to tithe it. Rabbi Yossi sover kivin diyada hamocher mehashlichus afal pi shalokach bistam lo niskavin hamocher hazel lezakos ela lebal hamos Am Haaretz umemela nasan lo davar mitukan ve'eno tzarich la'aser. And Rabbi Yossi disagrees and says that when the seller sold it, he knew that this guy that is coming to him to buy is a frum guy, is a knowledgeable guy, but he also realizes that he's a shaliach. And as such, he has in mind that in the event that he's buying it for an Am Haaretz, I better tithe it. And therefore you may assume that the seller tithed. Va'omer ha'Yerushalmi de lefi zeh, im natan hamocher yerek echad yoter b'matana, L'das Rabbi Yehuda zemagia lelokeach, l'das Rabbi Yossi zemagia lishnehem. So the Yerushalmi says, according to this, right, it all depends on how the seller views the shaliach. Does he view him as the primary person, or does he view the actual purchaser as the real person, as the main person? So the Yerushalmi says that if the seller gives a gift, let's say he gives some kohlrabi to the guy in addition to whatever he's buying, so according to Rabbi Yehuda, that goes to the shaliach who's standing in front of him, because that's who he's got his mind on. And according to Rabbi Yossi, the seller has his mind on the original person. The Hikshasa Gemara Sham. The matzano b'makom acher sheRabbi Yossi omer shahamocher hiskavin l'zakos lebal hamos. The kanhu omer sheze magia lishneim dainu yachloku. So the Gemara challenges this. It says in one place we find that Rabbi Yossi says that the seller intended to give it to the actual person who's shelling out the money. And now he's saying just the opposite. And that it goes to both of them. Rabbi Yossi says it goes to both of them, and therefore they should have to split it. V'tirtza haGemara dekan shneim cholkem mishum sha'amatan higi al yedei ma'otav shel zeh al yedei raglav shel zeh. Dahainu shetarach hashliach lavav liknot hilkach shneim cholkem. So the Gemara says that according to Rabbi Yossi, really they should split it, and even though he says otherwise elsewhere, nonetheless, in this situation, since the sale is consummated through the efforts of both parties, the original buyer and his shaliach, because the original buyer is shelling out the cash, and the buyer is transporting the cash to the seller and then transporting the goods back to the buyer. Therefore, since they've both put effort, they should split it. So that's the principle of why it makes sense to split between the shaliach and the actual buyer. V'yesh la'ayin bazeh mima de'isa b'maseches ksuvas. De'isa b'mishnah sham almana shahita ksuvasa masayim u'machar shavimana b'masayim o shava masayim b'mana niskabla ksuvasa. So the Gemara talks about a woman's ksuva. It says, let's say a woman becomes widowed and she's entitled to collect her 200 zuz from the estate of her deceased husband. That's what she's entitled to in the ksuva. If she sells her ksuva, so the halacha is that's a valid sale. Whether she sells it for more than 200 zuz or whether she sells it for less than 200 zuz, it's a legal sale, and she's entitled to keep, she has to relinquish the ksuva to the buyer, and she gets to keep whatever she got for the ksuva. The hikshasa Gemara sham, ma'ishna shava basaya b'bone the amri laha yisomim atif sadet et atzmeich b'meshem achart ksuva seich b'chatzi machir. So why is, the Gemara asks, if she sells her 200 zuz ksuva for 100, the heirs can say to her, we're done with you. You've sold your ksuva, and it's your loss. Okay? Shavimana b'masayim nami tomer lahem halmana ani hervachti la'atzmi. So if she sells 100 zuz ksuva for 200, why nami tomer lahem halmana ani hervachti la'atzmi? Why can't she say the same thing? That I've made the profit belongs to me. So you heirs go and pay out the ksuva to the guy who bought it, the 100, and I get to keep the 200. So I don't know why that shouldn't be the case. But the Gemara seems to say that that's not the case. Almana haisa ksuvasa masayim umachar shavimana b'masayim. Oh, I see. In other words, the case is like this. She has a 200 zuz ksuva, and she sells half of her ksuva for 200. So now there are going to be two people collecting from the estate. One guy's going to be taking 100, and she's going to be taking 100 from the estate. Oshava masayim b'mana niskabla ksuvasa. So the Gemara asks, Shava masayim b'mana, the amri laha yisomim. So if she sells her 200 zuz ksuva for 100, the heirs can say you lost out. But let's say she sells only half of her ksuva for 200. Why can't the heirs say the same thing to her? Amar Rav Nachman, kan shana Rebbe hakol lebal hamos. So Rav Nachman taught that everything goes to the person who's holding the money. Kedetanya hosifalo echas yisera hakol l'shliach divrei Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Yossi Omar cholkin. Okay, so this is a much more detailed Gemara. We'll have to look into this. Oh, this is a much more detailed shuva.
So why would somebody pay 200 zuz for 100 zuz ksuba?
That's a good question. Why would someone do it? Maybe because he wants to get in with the heirs of this estate, or for whatever reason. He may have his own reason why he's paying more. But anyway, it's a much more detailed tshuva, and so we'll have to pass on it for now. Because it goes on for many, many pages. Yeah. Okay, so we'll hold it here for today. We'll see you, Mirza Shem, tomorrow. Take care, everyone.
How's your family in California?
Good day.
Not everyone's